We'll go ahead and start this off then. Call to order the Thursday, April 23rd, 2020 Watertown City Plan Commission meeting. Need a roll call?
Hanson,
Here.
Dolly,
Here.
Dargits Johnson,
Here.
Stein,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Culhane,
Mr. Culhane, are you on mute?
Culhane,
May not be back from
Here.
recess yet. There we
Sorry.
go.
and Kays.
Yep, here.
Thank you all. We'll go on to item 3 on the agenda, is invitation for public comment participants submittal. So we will have a time later towards the end of the agenda for people to comment in the public if it's on an item that's not on the agenda. Item 4 is the approval of the agenda. I'll need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Rhonda,
Second, Liam.
second by Liam. We'll take a roll call vote on that.
Sounds good. Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Moving on then with the agenda, we've got the regular agenda, item 5A. I would note that I will be recusing myself from any discussion or voting on this item, but I'll help to facilitate the meeting agenda. Brandy, if you want to kick that off, it's resolution 2020-17.
Yep, thank you, Blake. So this is the commission approval of resolution number 2020-17, approving the vacation of a portion of public right-of-way for 14th Avenue, actually 14th Street Southwest, or also known as Oakwood Road. I'll pull up here on GIS that so you can get your bearings of where this is. It has multiple names, but on the plat it is 14th Street Southwest. So currently, Dave Redlin owns, or DPC Properties owns this property here that used to be owned by the state. Just recently traded hands, I guess. But so they signed off and have petitioned to vacate this adjacent right-of-way of Oakwood Road, or 14th Street Southwest. And then along with the property owner here, which is still Terex, South Dakota, so Clint Weber signed off on the petition as well, because you have to have all abutting property owners to sign off on the vacation petition. So the reason for doing that is just that there's an excessive amount of right-of-way. There's about 100 feet there today. And for a street of this capacity, which is a local street, it would typically just be 66 feet. So now that this property is owned by a different owner, they have different intentions for it. They're hoping to maybe get some more buildable space, because otherwise it is pretty narrow, and with the setbacks, you don't really have a lot of use for that. So it would be appropriate to minimize this right-of-way back down to 66 feet.
Thank you, Brandy. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing.
Brandy, this is Todd. Is this consistent with some of the past policies that we talked about when it came to vacation of public right-of-way?
Yep, very much so. So then you'll notice there on the background on the agenda how the facts are actually stated from the procedure guideline that we have. There are the A through F that's given to applicants of what we are reviewing when we're looking at a vacation proposal.
Thank you.
Yep. And then one thing just to note too is the sanitary sewer does run along that boulevard. And so where the new property line, where the sanitary sewer is today, it will be within an easement still, because this will so when they take 33 feet to the north, there are some areas where that sewer line will actually run with the property line. So, but just to assure you that it will be within an easement, and that is per this resolution, even before the plat would come forth.
With that being,
Brandy, could you show that? Could you show that, please, on the Exhibit A on the screen?
Yep. You guys can see my GIS right now, right?
Correct.
Okay. And let me get to it. Yeah. So then you'll see that dashed line is where the 10-foot utility easement will go upon platting, but otherwise it'll still be retained within an easement that will keep with this vacation.
will that road get improved? The Oakwood Drive Road, that does not have curb and gutter, no foreseeing that being done in the future then?
Not with this development, because this would be, it's already a city street and it's dedicated right of way, so that would have to be up to the city for an improvement project. But nothing that would be these developers, they wouldn't be required to do the improvements.
Can you tell us what the plan is for the development?
Well, and actually, you guys will be getting a request from them. I believe they're wanting to do storage units.
With one access off of Oak and then their own?
That will have to be reviewed when we would get a commercial site plan application.
Is there anybody in the public that would like to make a comment before we close the public hearing? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close that.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I was fumbling for my mute button. This is Mayor Sarah Karen. And I just wanted to point out that if this property is platted, the road requirements can be a condition of platting. And I was, I'm not sure if they were planning to plat, but that is a condition that the city can add for development of this land.
But they're not having to dedicate right of way, that's when we would have the development agreement that's when we would enact those requirements.
No, but if it doesn't meet the city's standard and they want to develop there and they have to plat, it could be a condition of the plat.
Do you know, Brandy, where they would propose to get access to the storage? Is it going to be off of Oak or is it off of Fourth?
I believe it's going to be off of Oakwood. I know that they've looked at, but they could off of Fourth Ave too.
Okay, because, well, Mr. Dolly works there, but, I've traveled that road, that little Oak, and it's narrow and it's not marked. It's an accident waiting to happen with that little loop-de-doo curve there. And so if we're going to increase traffic on that, I guess my concern will be that needs to be wider, whether it's a city expense or this developer's expense. So I guess I'm kind of following the mayor's train of thought there, is that will be something that I think we need to take into consideration on that street, because it seems narrow. It might be wide, but it just, with those ditches, if you will, it kind of seems like there's a ditch to the one side. So you always kind of curve, you hug to the center line. And I'm surprised we don't have more accidents there with the amount of, with Terex. I know they're moving, but it is a highly traveled road at this moment, even with Persona and the other, companies down there.
Yeah, and since you bring it up, the city did just recently come in and mark off the curve there for quite a few feet in either direction so that there's no parking on that because of that fact.
I might just add too that I don't think that putting a condition on this vacation for looking at the street improvements or any of that would be appropriate. I think that that will come when the plat comes forward. And then also we have to look into our ordinance, and if we accepted this street at one time as city standards, I think that makes it really hard for developers to really know what will be expected. So I think we'll have to really look at our engineering design standards and make sure that whatever comes forward with the plat, that anything that would be required would be in the development agreement, but they will not be dedicating right of way.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on Brandy's comments there. I think that, a few different thoughts come to mind here. One, I want to make sure that we're looking at this objectively as far as a right-of-way vacate request. I know that it's easy to, and it's good to have the background discussion of what's going to happen with this property. But I think the action should be objective to, is it appropriate to vacate this portion of right-of-way to expand the private lot owner's lot area? From the city's perspective, I would agree, yes, that amount of right-of-way that we've got there is egregious, it's excessive, it's not needed. The utilities would be protected appropriately, as we've indicated with the required easements for that sewer line. So I think that all of our boxes are checked there from a staffing standpoint, and would leave it up to the board to decide the appropriateness of the vacate from there, based on those criteria that we look at that Brandy cited earlier. As far as the roadway improvements, I don't know, Brandy, we haven't looked far enough ahead on this, but this may even qualify for an administrative plat, which would mean that it wouldn't even become before the boards subsequent to this action. And if that were the case, and if that were what the applicant applied for, what we would do is look at the street configuration in comparison to our new engineering design standards, see if it does meet any of the minimum width criteria and things of that nature. We do allow rural street sections, roadways without curb and gutter, that is, in areas of town. But those criteria would be looked at and checked off at the time of receipt of that plat. Whether it's an admin plat or a standard plat, I don't know, just again, because we haven't looked that far ahead on this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make those couple points.
Yeah, that's a good point, Heath. It looks like it can be administrative because it does not require the dedication of right-of-way or construction of new streets, except that arterial roadways identified on the major street plan will be required to dedicate the necessary right-of-way. Yeah, so that is a good point where it might not have to come before the board even. But we would look at, like Heath said, we would look at our engineering design standards and make sure that everything was taken care of.
Just a question in a matter
clarity. Sorry, go ahead.
Just a question, a matter of process and policy from the staff side on those administratively platted situations. Is there ever any waiver of right to protest in relation to those boulevard and infrastructure improvements?
Not that I would typically administer from a staffing standpoint, no. The admin plat, there are specific criteria in the subdivision regulations in the zoning ordinance that would have to be checked off to make sure that I can administratively, as the city engineer, sign off on it. And that's what we would check off and make sure. I cannot, however, grant any waivers of right to protest or require those kinds of things to the applicant as a staff member. The council or you guys as the planning commission would have to do that.
As you treat all these situations then equally across the districts based upon your checklists and criteria and design standards?
Absolutely. As far as an admin plat goes, correct. Those criteria all have to be met in order.
Right of way, that's when the street requirements for how it would be installed are taken care of. So before the city would have accepted it, which I'm sure back when this was, there was probably not a formal acceptance, which is what we're trying to implement now. But it makes it, this should have been developed to city standards at the time that it was first platted and the right-of-way was dedicated. I think that it'll make it very, very cumbersome for developers to develop property if things weren't done correctly the first time, to have it fall on them.
Well, again, I'm no engineer. I'm just looking at this as safety, and and again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't approve this. I guess maybe I'm putting the horse or the cart before the horse here, but I see the access points on there, and if that's, I mean, I know that that's not set in stone, but I just know that the traffic line coming out of there when it's shift change, and again, I know Terex is leaving, but you're not used to anybody entering that street from the north, and you're not used to the curb.
Those are easements. So those
The
won't,
access, the access points, the two
Right here?
access points?
yeah, those are just utility easements that are,
No, the approaches show on there, man, there.
oh, actually, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so those are the two. Again,
Right,
I'm
and-
way ahead of myself probably. It's just in developing that, you're not used to anybody pulling onto the street there. It just,
Yep.
I just think it needs to be,
Yeah, and by no means is this vacation approving where they're proposing their accesses. That will come at the time of plating, and then also for the commercial building permit that then will
right.
be
I'm just
reviewed.
stating that as, because we won't probably be a part of that, that is a concern, so I'm just throwing it out there for you.
Yep, good deal. Thank you.
We do have the public hearing closed at this point. We don't have a motion.
Motion to approve, Case.
A motion by Mr. Case,
Second, Colhane.
second by Mr. Culhane. Any further discussion from the board? If not, we'll take a roll call vote. I've recused myself.
Sounds good. Hanson,
Yes.
Jargis Johnson,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 5B, Resolution 2020-18.
Okay, so this is the commission approval of resolution number 2020-18, approving the preliminary plan for Compesca Dunes third subdivision. So here, everyone on Teams can still see my screen, right?
Yeah, that's correct, Randy.
Okay, we'll get this zoomed out maybe. Okay. So you'll see here, so the property owner is Paul Carlson, and he recently acquired the property, which is platted as Lot A of Compesca Dunes second subdivision. So this, now he's coming forward and would like to develop this property. And you'll see that right now it is also, it's currently zoned R1 single family residential, and he is proposing some variations in the zoning district. So he would do R1, R2, and R3. R3 being multifamily residential, R2 being single family attached, and then obviously R1 is single family attached. So you'll see what he's laying out here, some implementations of new streets, and then he will be expanding the current detention pond a little bit onto his property, expanding it there, but then also we'll be working with the current owners of this pond, potentially. And this will be worked out when the plat and everything comes forward too. It doesn't really impact the preliminary plan, but they're hoping to be able to work with them and then be able to get this pond dedicated to the city, as the city does, as long as it's built to the city's acceptance, or it's it's able to be accepted by the city and it was built to our required improvements, then the city does maintain the residential detention ponds or regional detention ponds that are required. Now that's not typical for commercial or industrial, or I guess non-residential development. Some other points here for this preliminary plan. If I missed any, yeah, I guess that's kind of basically what he's proposing here. It'll be in 4 development phases projected to span into 2029. That's proposed. So, and Paul is on the line if you guys do have questions for him.
Brandy, in regards.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would just add too that the staff review process for this has gone through a few different rounds actually, where we talked in depth about the detention pond for this portion of the subdivision and how to tie it into the existing detention pond to try to maximize that the effective use of the existing pond and the potential transfer of that to the city. So that was one component that we talked at extent with the applicant. Along with the street configuration, we were able to work with them, and they were more than willing to accommodate our request to minimize, and they actually ended up removing all the cul-de-sacs that were originally proposed. Not that cul-de-sacs aren't allowed, but anytime we could prevent them from being installed, it's most ideal from a street maintenance standpoint, from garbage service to snow plowing and all the things of that nature when it comes to maintenance and perpetuity of the city's ownership of those streets. So I just wanted to point out the applicant's willingness to work with us on those requests and that we've gone through a few different rounds with them on this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Heath. Brandy, a question in regards to park dedication and that process in relation to this.
Yep, and so that was taken care of during the first preliminary plan phase, which is good. That's how they're supposed to go about it. And that was in conjunction with the golf course being right there.
Yep. Thank you for the clarity.
Yep. Yeah, good question too, because obviously when we're looking at a master plan of residential development, that is something that is required. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
One additional question in relation to the detention ponds and the water. One of these shows an aerial view that includes south across the street there and a future conceptual detention pond.
Yeah.
Is that a requirement for any of this development, or is that simply if there's additional development down the road?
So that's actually already accommodated for with the Gulfview Estates. They use that area to drain, and there actually was no formal easement.
I'm not talking about the one on the southwest corner here. There's another that has a satellite image that has one across the street from the southeast corner there.
Oh.
That conceptual detention pond.
Pre-developed drainage area.
It doesn't look to me that it's required for this development. I'm not sure why it was there.
Yeah, it's not required unless it would, because this is somebody else's property, so
Yeah.
this could be a location maybe that it's probably the low spot, that if they developed this quarter section.
There is a note that there is some pre-developed drainage going into there, and so, maybe it's just a future forward-looking thing from the engineer's perspective. But,
not required for this development. But
okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against.
Brandy, this is Todd. Quick question. The proposed layout design transitions from the R3 and R2 to the R1s, all this is consistent with the recently approved comprehensive land use plan?
Yep,
Thank
this
you.
is all proposed to be residential, so.
The storage units that are being proposed in that southeast corner, are there going to be requirements on them as far as screening adjacent to the R3 and that sort of a thing?
They will have to come back to the Board of Adjustment to get the conditional use for storage units in the R3 district. So not only will they have to rezone that property that's R1 today, they'll have to rezone to the R3 and then also come to the Board of Adjustment for the conditional use of storage units. So that
Thank
could be
you.
a condition that is put on at that time.
You said Mr. Carlson is
Brandy?
here?
Yep. Yeah,
Hello?
Mr. Carlson here on the line?
well, somebody had said, hey, Brandy, was that Matt?
It's Mark Timmerman.
Oh, okay.
This is Paul Carlson.
Okay, sounds good. So if the chairman wants to call on one of you.
Yeah, Paul, I had a question for you in relation to the timing on this, as far as the phases go. Wait, what
At
portion of
this
this is
time,
going to
I do
develop
not-
first?
This one.
Basically, at this time, I am not going to be actively pursuing, developing the entire property. The first phase, if I'm understanding things right, is that I'm looking at the storage facility, and then, down the road, possibly looking at either selling or, partnering to be able to develop the remaining development, in a much future date.
And then from the standpoint of the city staff, how does that phasing tie into the requirements for that detention pond expansion?
So his phase one actually would not trigger that he would need detention, but it's going to work out where he's going to utilize some of this fill. You guys all know that this is really low area, or low land and a high water table. So he'll use some of that fill as he improves that pond to start this development.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity there.
And just to clarify, Brandy, I believe the intent is that not only using that fill in that area, but also would construct the detention pond and connect it to that existing one, correct?
Yes, yep.
Thank you. Was that Mr. Kemner on the line?
It's Timmerman.
Timmerman. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hi, Brandy. Someone mentioned the proposed, I don't know if it's detention pond or a low spot across the street. I think that's my property. And it's the first I've seen of it until I got these maps a couple days ago, and it's interesting. What does that mean exactly? That it's, it's written on the map, some kind of proposed detention pond or area.
I'm assuming that, that would all just be just hypothetical, and the engineer probably included that just if it's a low area, but nothing would happen to your property unless you would move forward with developing it. So you wouldn't have to
Okay.
put a pond there.
Yeah.
Got it.
It looked like, because of the way that it's marked as a conceptual, that if you did develop that land into your own, residential development area, because it is a natural low spot, that would be a good location for a retention pond. And that was the clarity point that I had asked Brandy previously, was that the on-site detention ponds are actually covering this proposed development completely.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I was just going to state, and I'll reiterate or reinforce what you just said, that is correct. It is not anticipated that any off-site detention requirements are necessary for this development. I think that might have just been a conceptual thing from the developer's engineer on, I guess I can only speculate why it's there, but it's absolutely not a requirement for this development. I can state that with confidence.
All right.
Thank you,
Good.
Heath. Do you have any
And then the
additional
other,
comments or?
the other question I had is a couple things that are going on. One is someone mentioned storage. I guess, what exactly is that? And then secondly, multifamily, how, what kind of structures and what kind of multifamily would be allowed to go on this?
So the R3 multifamily residential district allows for typically apartment units. It would allow for single-family homes or duplexes, townhomes, anything that would have multifamilies inhabiting. And then also we do have conditional uses, which is where the storage units comes in. And so I'll find those and I'll read those off to you, what the conditional uses can be. Now that has to be granted by the Board of Adjustment, but you could have storage units, clubs, lodges, and community centers, clinics and hospitals, licensed residential treatment or group homes, or specific use office buildings.
And so just to clarify that process, then the preliminary plan wouldn't necessarily approve the storage units. The applicant would then have to come back before the board. Not sure if you listened into the Board of Adjustment preceding the Plan Commission meeting here, but going very much through that same process of vetting things out prior to any potential approval of a conditional use.
Got it. So right now, as we sit here today, it's just houses, single family, and multifamily. It sounds like you're talking about duplexes, not,
Well,
20-unit buildings or anything like that.
if he were to, right now it's all single-family residential, but if he were to get the rezone, which also has to go through the Plan Commission and the City Council, but typically if it's approved in the preliminary plan, we do like to follow through with those, but you still have to go through with the formal process of a rezone. So then if he were, did you catch that?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so then if he were to rezone to R3, then he could do duplexes, he could have single-family homes, or he could have apartment houses.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in here quick?
Yes, sir.
My name's Jason Mark. I'm actually Paul's neighbor to the east in Lot 2 next to the detention pond. Just have a couple of questions. Paul, how far away from our property line is that drainage ditch going to be?
When you talk drainage ditch, are you talking the extension of the pond or?
When I look at the plan, Paul, when I look to the straight south where we're at, there's an arrow pointing into a 10-foot drainage ditch, that drainage area that basically what it looks like, it runs the whole length of the south side of the current property, and then it comes down into the retention pond. So how far off of our property lines will that be?
Well, it would start. Of course, there's the easements there. I'm assuming, but it would start on that back of that property line and run the length to allow that drainage down into the retention pond.
Okay.
How deep that would be, I'm not exactly sure how big of a swell per se it might be.
Okay. I'm curious because okay, for needs to be a recreation/park area. Is that correct, or am I wrong on that?
That's correct.
Okay, and am I correct in saying that you said the golf course suffices?
Yeah, they gave land when this was first developed. This subdivision gave land to the golf course to meet their park dedication requirement.
Okay. So there's nowhere for the children that potentially could move in here to play other than go to the golf course?
Or their backyards. I mean, they are pretty large lots.
No, I understood.
That was the decision that the park board made at that time.
So,
Okay.
yeah, because
And-
this land has already been brought in the previous master plan portion, it was annexed into the city and it was zoned, the dedication would have taken place at the time of that original development. Now,
Okay.
if a new development, went across the street, and we're annexing into the city and going through that plan, they would also have to be subject to the same park dedication requirements, and that gets approved through the process in front of the Parks and Recreation Board. And there are, options depending on, the situation. But this is not another trigger for that since it was already previously addressed and approved.
Okay. All right, no, that makes, thank you for clarifying, that makes
Yep.
perfect sense. Completely understand that. And then with the addition to the water retention pond back there, it almost seems to me that you're almost gonna have to build this thing in a way that it's all gonna slope right down to the middle, to make that work. I can't see much on the engineer's plan, enough to read it. But was there anything done with an elevation survey on there too, or did I miss that?
Yeah, so all of the drainage requirements for the preliminary plan were reviewed by the engineering staff, and so they met all of those requirements, and so you do have to show the contours. I mean, there's a lot there. The list is very thorough, and then they also submit a hydraulic analysis to say that the capacity of the pond that they're proposing will detain the all of the runoff coming from the development, and that it'll be outletted for the pre-existing pre-development. Oh my gosh, I'm really struggling there. The pre-development rate.
And that,
Okay.
that includes onto adjacent lots, right? So they can't develop this in a way that it's going to push more water onto existing lots.
Right.
That's my main concern. You said it yourself that it's a low-lying area. The water table is fairly high. You get a good rain in June, July, it doesn't take very long for the street to fill up, and I'm worried. That was my one worry. And if you're saying the engineers did their due diligence on the survey, I believe you on that. So thank you for clarifying. The last piece that I have is it looks like the lots directly behind myself, Mr. Carlson, and then the empty lot to the west of his property is zoned. It looks like R2. Is there any particular reason why we're not zoning that R1 so it's houses all the way across and not a potential different type situation? Granted, I know it's a big lot there.
This is a call. It's like people are talking. It's like they're in a building. I wanted to see if they're doing the call. Just a second.
I think we're getting some background noise there from.
Yeah, all right. There's nothing to see.
Was that question for Mr. Carlson?
I'm still here. I think somebody just unmuted by accident.
So
My main,
I might
when I look at it, go ahead.
I might be able to answer that where you were getting at with. So he is asking why these are zoned R2 versus R1, and that was probably to accomplish transition zoning. So where the R3 is, then adjacent to them there would be some R2. But there is R1 then adjacent, and you guys are in your backyards as well. But maybe Paul can speak to that if there was a different reason for that. But that's my assumption. And typical zoning practice would be transition zoning.
Yeah, I guess my intentions of the development would be that those would be similar homes as what we have on the street now on this side. I would have no intention of duplexes or anything like that, or multi-homes and that type of thing.
Okay.
If you're not planning duplexes, then why would you zone them that way?
Yeah, it's going on.
Well, I guess I was working with, you know, the engineer and the city, and I think like Brandy was kind of saying, is the transition of that, you know, that kind of falls in line with how the city would typically do that type of thing. You know, I guess I'm not quite sure, you know, like I say, my plan was that if anything, they would be single-family homes along that line.
Including on those larger lots that are currently,
Lots, and I feel that, so this street had to curve to accommodate for the detention pond, because at first they had it shown that it would be parallel, but then we requested that they put the pond together so we don't have ponds on each side of the street. So that would have been two, where, I mean, it's a large lot, so at least it gives you options if you are having a hard time selling it for a single family lot, that somebody could develop it as duplexes.
I might have missed out on things. My phone muted on me automatically.
Brandy, the dashed line there on the rear part of that property line, what is that depicting?
That's that drainage swale that the neighbor was asking about. So on other areas, they're accommodating for their drainage with a sump pump collection system. So they'll be running pipe, and that could be an option here too. That those systems are private, so the city would not be taking over the maintenance or accepting them in any way. But that would be an option that that they could do over here too. But I think as well, they have more space, so they could do open drainage.
That effectively increases the setback from the neighboring property line as well.
Yep, so that's 25 feet, which is typically the rear yard setback anyway, but.
Yeah. But in this case, you wouldn't be able to put, you know, any structure, no fencing or.
Like at some point in time.
This is Paul's neighbor, Jason. I would agree with that. That would make me sleep a lot better at night.
And I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, prior to this preliminary plan, right? The only thing that the people had to go by what was previously approved, and what was previously approved was R1. So by doing that and giving that R1 buffer to the existing landowners, it allows them for the future purchase of these plots to go into it knowing the revised intentions of the development, right?
Yeah, I think.
Well, we have the public hearing open. Is there anybody else here to speak on behalf or against? Any additional questions? I appreciate all the input and the candid feedback from everybody. I know it's a little challenging to do this in this kind of forum with the technology and trying to use the phones and the Teams and internet streaming. So I do appreciate everybody's persistence to stick with us. If there's no other comments, though, I will go ahead and close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-18. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
With the only proposed change was that the preliminary plat reflect that the 3 lots zoned R2 on the north side of 11th Avenue Northwest be proposed to be rezoned R1 when that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Case.
So we'll ask for an amended preliminary plan, Paul, if you can reach out to your engineer and they can get that sent over, just so the approved version is up to date. So we don't have to search for the minutes in the future.
Okay, yeah, I'll work with engineering and get that revised.
Yep, with the Austin Engineering.
Just a question
Correct.
in regards to accessing that file then. So we get a revised preliminary plan. Does that get updated back into the meeting agenda that's published online?
No.
Where does that archive reside for individuals then?
Well, so it's in staff files. But also then they would know if they were going back in the archive of what has been posted on the agenda for the meetings, then they could reach out, and if they were wanting an approved plan, because they would know that what was submitted was amended slightly with the zoning updates.
And the minutes are going to reflect the fact that it wasn't just approved straight. There was
Yep.
resolution amendments made before the resolution was approved. So that record exists in the public in that realm.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
I just have
Mr.
one.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
sorry to cut off the commissioner, if she'd like to go first.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask for a point of clarity on the zoning adjustment there. It was not anticipated to change the zoning for those northerly lots of Block 3 to have them be R2, then would it, in the spirit of transition zoning?
Block.
Heath, I can't read the map. It needs to zoom in a little bit so I know exactly where you're talking. I was speaking to those 3 lots that the neighbors were talking about. I guess if you wanted to extend it, you could take that lot 15 on 34th would be another one that would be abutting existing residential R1 zone property.
Yeah, so for your rezone, so these R2, lot 15, 16, 17, and block 2, those are what you are proposing to be R1 or amending with the motion. But
That's my motion.
what Heath was bringing up is, I believe Heath, now, lot 2 through 6 of block 3, if that would be zoned R2, is that where you were thinking, Heath?
That's the question I wanted to pose, if we're okay with those remaining R3 immediately across the street from the R1, or do we want that row of lots to be zoned R2?
My preference is buyer beware.
Yeah, and I guess that was the point that I was trying to make previously, was that if a person now comes in and buys one of these R1 lots, they know that the preliminary plan is approved for R3 now across the street from them. So they're going into it with the full knowledge of what it's going to develop into.
And I guess my perspective would be is that if the developer is having problems moving those lots to the north because of potential R3, he could always come back and go to an R2. I think it would, it'd be easier to do an up zone than a down zone.
Yeah, no, that sounds fair enough. I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody that that's how it would get left.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, Heath. Rhonda?
Well, my question was, okay, the green lot, we know that the one north to it is the water retention. Is there, I guess, there's 33 new lots coming in, and like the neighbor had mentioned, that was fine and dandy that we foresaw to put, land with the golf course, but kids aren't going to go throw a ball at golf course. They'll get screamed at and told to leave. So I appreciate what was done in the future, but I think in retrospect, we missed it. If we're going to bring this in as residential, there is no place for kids to play. And then if we're talking multi-family homes, apartment buildings, you're going to have children. So my question, since that boat has sailed, that little green spot, is there any place, is that going to be too sloped that it is? Okay. That was my question. If something could be set there, and of course when it's wet it can't be used, but we don't want kids playing next to a pond either with water. But
Yeah, and
just wondered.
It's unfortunate. I mean, this was done years and years ago, and we've discussed a lot about how we're doing park dedications, when we're doing park dedications.
Right,
in
but
the
you can't
recent
even
years.
get from this development to the golf course. Even if you could go play on
Right.
it, you'd be walking through people's yards. So
Yeah, I have no doubt that if this was coming in as a fresh development today, that it would be a completely different discussion.
Now, there is a 5-foot access easement for them to walk to the golf course, but yeah, as far as what recreation.
where's that?
right here.
Clearly marked, I'm sure.
Yeah. Probably has a fence over it or something. No, I think actually this subdivision, that's another thing actually that this developer has talked about, that they would like to make that more of a known pathway and potentially increase that 5 foot so it could be a golf cart path.
Okay, and I have one of those in my own neighborhood, that this sidewalk goes right between a residential 2 homes that connects, it's a walk path for children to get home from school from Lincoln. So if that were, put in as a,
Well-
concrete sidewalk, at least they would feel comfortable, because
Yeah.
otherwise you really do feel like you're encroaching on other people's.
Well, and I think that
Space.
I think that there was an issue. Now, I wasn't obviously here for that, but I think that they had an issue that they didn't want people driving the golf carts on the street, so they didn't want that paved. I think is any history that I've been told. Paul might have more history on it, but I know that he wants to work with the previous developer on getting a path put in there. But that will be all private negotiations.
Any additional discussion? We do have a motion by Mr. Kays on the table. I believe we still need a second.
Ford seconds.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. There's no additional comments from the board. We'll go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Resolution passes. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to item 5C on the agenda, 2020-19.
Yes, and actually, so I'm going to explain agenda items C and D because they are related to each other as the annexation and as an annexation and zoning, but obviously then they're agendized as 2 separate items as they need separate action. But I'll
I think for the purpose of the public hearing, though, we can probably do a public hearing on both simultaneously and then take the resolutions separately.
yes, I would say that would be okay. Matt, if you have any problem with that.
I think we've done that in a similar
Yeah.
scenario.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so this is commission approval of resolution number 2020-19, initiating annexation of a tract of land contiguous to the city of Watertown to be known as Alma First Edition. And then as it states on the agenda, this is contingent to item D, resolution number 2020, which is establishing the zoning designation of I-1 Light Industrial District for the area of land to be known as the Alma First Edition upon annexation. So this is, and I can get to it on GIS here, but if you guys are familiar with Big Shots Fireworks over on the east side of town, just west of Lou's Fireworks, they currently remain in the county. And so they do have, Watertown Municipal Utilities made an agreement with them that said that they could have city services as long as they annexed within 5 years. Well, the issue with that was we didn't allow it in city ordinance. So then, if you remember, just recently we've passed ordinance amendments to allow the use, the warehousing and sales of fireworks within the I-1 and the I-2, which I-1 is light industrial, I-2 is heavy industrial zoning districts. And so we created a new ordinance that outlined the design standards for firework uses. So that will all have to be adhered to, and his property does meet all of the stipulations outlined in that chapter, which is chapter 2181. And so this all falls into basically wrapping up that agreement that Watertown Municipal Utilities had with Mr. Alama, who is the owner of this property. That would expire on June 23rd of this year, I believe, if I find that date. Yeah, June 29th of 2020. So that this is memorializing that, and then also that he'll be proposing to annex and zone into the city as I-1 light industrial, which will allow him to sell the sell or warehouse class 1 4G fireworks. And he is going with I-1 because he would not meet the minimum lot size requirement for I-2 of heavy industrial. You have to have 220,000 square feet to be zoned I-2, which is what Lou's Fireworks is zoned. The difference about that is that Lou can warehouse or sell, I don't even know the word, just more extreme fireworks, I guess. The class 1 3G, more dangerous, maybe that's the better word. But, so that's the reason why he's going with I-1. And I don't think I have any other comments for that one.
Okay, thank you, Brandy. With that, I'll open the public hearing, and just to reiterate, I'm opening the public hearing for both 2020-19 and 2020-20. We'll open the public hearing for those now, and then we'll take the resolutions as separate actions after discussion. If there's anybody in the public that would...
My name is Michael Alama. I am here if anybody has any questions.
Mr. Chair, this is just Todd, and been around this situation for more than 5 or 6 years. Mr. Lama had come to the county, and as you know, Luke Muller, the zoning officer, worked with him to establish his ability to sell fireworks in the county, because at the time the city didn't have the ability to allow Mr. Lama to sell fireworks within the city limits, which I think he wanted to do from the very get-go. His building does have fire suppression, to my understanding, and it makes perfect sense that the city can bring him in and start collecting sales tax from Mr. Alama. So I wholeheartedly approve this idea moving forward.
Yeah, and as Brandy had alluded to, this is a path that's been kind of laid out and been working towards for a number of years here. 5 years was the expiration period that's set to expire this year, right?
Yep.
And we've been working on it prior to that even. Question in regards to, so the ordinance is passed now. It passed through the board, it passed through city council, it's in codified law, right, for the city. It makes it a conditional use for I-1, is that correct?
Yes.
So,
Good point.
so the applicant would still have to come in for a conditional use after annexing in and zoning in?
Yep, and so how I've worked with that timeline is that, so he's being heard, the annexation and zoning is being heard by Plan Commission today, then it'll go on to City Council for 2 readings. So it'll go for, the second reading and approval will be on May 20th at that City Council meeting. And then he is slated, as long as he meets the deadline by next Friday, then he will be on the May 24th Board of Adjustment meeting to get his conditional use for the sale and warehouse of fireworks in the I-1 district. And then that way everything will be wrapped up. So it'll be approved. So Board of Adjustment will know if council approved the annexation and zoning. And then, but also protects Mr. Alama that he has 25 days then after that is approved until it would become effective. So he would have that time to then go to the board and make sure that his business and what is existing is able to be used in the city before the annexation and zoning would actually be effective.
Okay, thank you. Just going to ask one more time on the public hearing if there's any additional questions or comments from the public while we have the public hearing open.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This is Chip. Brandy, is this I-1 we're gonna do?
Yep, that's what's proposed.
The property that Lou's, is that a I-1 also?
It's I-2.
Okay.
Because like I had said earlier that he's not able to meet the minimum lot size requirements. So that's why he's going with I-1 instead of the I-2, like loses.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
No additional concerns, Chip, just a point of clarity?
Yeah, I don't think there's a issue. I don't have all my stuff here at home, so I think we're fine. We can fix it if there is.
All right, if there's no additional comments from the public, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'll ask for two separate actions on this. We can start with the annexation and then we'll move on to the zoning.
Make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-18 for the annexation.
2020-19.
19.
We have a motion by Hanson,
Second.
Second.
second by Dargis Johnson. Liam, you might have thought you were first, but there was a little bit of delay in the room here, so.
Ready for
Go ahead
roll
and
call?
take a roll call vote.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Motion passes. We'll move on to the zoning 2020-20.
I'll make a motion to approve zoning for 2020-20.
We have a motion by Mr. Hanson,
Second.
second by Dargis Johnson. A roll call vote.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda, open public comments. Was there anybody needed to speak in the public on something that wasn't on the agenda tonight? Hearing none, I'll move on to new business.
I don't have any.
Any old business?
Nope.
No need for executive session.
Nope.
And I'll look for a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that
Ford
motion.
moves.
I'll second.
Motion by Ford and a second by Dargis Johnson. We'll take a roll call.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.